Tom Clarke from the Human Rights Law Centre wants Australia to put more pressure on Indonesia to meet its international obligations. And he joins us now live from Melbourne. Good morning to you, Tom Clarke. What kind of issues are West Papuans currently facing?
Unfortunately, the kind of human rights violations that take place in West Papua are extreme. We're talking about political assassinations, torture, the violent repression of peaceful gatherings, the fundamental basic democratic rights that here in Australia we take for granted in West Papua are severely and routinely curtailed.
It's interesting to note that if we go back in time, East Timor, formerly another territory of Indonesia, gained much more of a profile here in Australia, and of course Australian involvement in its transition to independence. Do you see that there's any possibility for Australia to take a similar role perhaps in West Papua's future?
Look, I'm a little bit reluctant to draw too strong a comparison between the two, but certainly there's a lot of scope that for Australia to really provide some human rights leadership on this issue in the region. Also, if you consider that Australia has just assumed the presidency of the UN Security Council. Now, we were elected to that council on the promise of being a principled advocate for human rights for all. So I think if we're going to live up to that noble pledge, then our Prime Minister really has to, he can't be shy in Jakarta in raising these issues and putting them on the agenda.
Well, the issue of sovereignty, though, has come up between Australia and Indonesia in recent weeks, given the situation and handling of our asylum seekers. How do you think, though, Indonesia will receive any kind of message from an Australian government regarding an issue in West Papua, which is Indonesian territory?
Look, there's no doubt that Australia's own problems and deficiencies with our human rights when it comes to asylum seeker policies does make this task more difficult. But there's still plenty of scope for Prime Minister Abbott to raise these topics. I think the key thing to keep in mind here is that the Australian-Indonesian relationship's a very important one, but it has to become mature enough that it can handle two-way criticisms when it comes to human rights concerns.
And of course there is also the criticism that Australia's own human rights record has had in recent times. There's been criticism regarding the issues around Indigenous Australians and of course also the detention indefinitely of some refugees. So will it be difficult then for Australia to be able to point out those issues affecting our neighbour Indonesia?
Look, I think this is the reality of international diplomacy, is that there will be some tough discussions that need to happen for Tony Abbott. But I think our Prime Minister would pride himself on being a straight talker. And I think that another thing to keep in mind is that these issues are interrelated. So just this week, 7 people from West Papua fled from West Papua, fearing for their lives, and they came to Australia seeking our protection. Now, they came into our jurisdiction for a very short period of time, and they were rushed out and we believe sent to PNG. But because of our own government's secrecy when it comes to reporting these kind of issues, we're not really sure on that. But I guess what that really highlights is that these issues are interrelated. The human rights situation in West Papua is not sustainable, and it's likely to lead to more people fleeing West Papua and coming to Australia and seeking our protection, as they have a right to do.
Tom Clarke from the Human Rights Law Centre, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.